Johnix's most recent adventure got underway on the 25th of June from Vereeniging, just south of Johannesburg. It was the 1,000-mile Joburg to Blouberg unsupported challenge. It's an informal challenge, I call it. So I liken it to something like the Drakensberg Grand Traverse. You can do it at any time of year. Get the GPX tracks, there's a fixed route, and it's 1,000 miles, 1,602 kilometers to be exact, from the Riviera Resort on the Vaal River at Vereeniging to Eden on the Bay in Blouberg via a whole series of back roads, mainly gravel, quiet roads, all the way through the Free State and the Northern Cape. The record holder for this informal challenge is Simon Rollo, 4 days, 22 hours and 8 hours. Needless to say, me and Nix were not going to be in the running for that, but a whole lot of fun was had by all nevertheless. We started off on the 25th. We woke up at 4 a.m. to the sound of pitter-patter of raindrops outside, and I thought I might be in a spot of bother at that point, because Nix had asked me, why are we doing it in the middle of winter when it's so damn cold? And my reply to her was, well, because it's dry. It is a summer rainfall area in this part of the world, but it didn't work out that way. That plan failed. It was wet. It only rained on the first morning. Fortunately, the weather cleared after that, and we didn't have any more rain troubles until near Cape Town, where it's winter rainfall past series. But there was a lot of mud around. There had been an abnormal winter, there'd been or summer, whichever one, and there had been a lot of rain in the recent months, and there were a lot of mud pools around. The route is gently undulating at best. There's one or two significant climbs right down near to Sutherland and past Sutherland and up to Ceres over Boerswaanwood. But before that, all the way to Sutherland, it's undulating at best. There's not many big climbs. The total vertical ascent on the route is 9,600 odd meters. The descent is over 11,000 meters because you're going down to the coast. So it's really not serious climbing. It's theoretically a relatively easy route, and if you do it in the cooler times of year, the heat shouldn't bother you either. I wouldn't go and do it in summer. But this year, as I've said, it was muddy. It had been raining in prior months, and that waylaid our plans for a sub 7-day finish on the first day already, really. We're just past Koppies. We got into this type of mud that clogs up your wheel and you can't move. It sticks to your bike, clogs up the wheel, stops them from moving. You can't even push your bike. So there was a whole lot of cleaning and carrying bikes through about 3 kilometers of mud. We couldn't go around it either because there were big thorn bushes at that point for the most part. And it probably took us about 4 hours to do 2 or 3 kilometers. So that already waylaid our plan, but that is the reality with these type of things, is that the best of plans go awry. If the conditions aren't perfect, then you just have to make another plan. Fortunately, my riding partner saw the funny side of it, so there was plenty of laughter and smiling, and I wasn't in too much trouble. But I have since changed my story. When she asked me why we do it in the cold, it's because the snakes are hibernating. It's not necessarily because it's going to be dry. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Whole lot of fun was had by all. We had some late arrivals in towns, which is sort of a no-no. Fortunately, Ventersburg, the first night where we arrived at midnight, is an N1 town, a big truck stop. So we found a guy called Jose who had accommodation for us. He had a 24-hour takeaway, and we could find him fairly easily. But you're not always so lucky in the smaller Free State towns that aren't big N1 stops. You can get there at midnight and you won't find a place to stay. You won't find anything open. You won't find any food. So the golden rule, which we didn't really adhere to, is get up very early and ride early and plan to be at your destination where you want to finish for the day, probably before dark. Because at dark, those towns shut down relatively quickly, or most of them often shut down very quickly. Anyway, we were lucky. The first 2 nights we arrived very late at our destination, but it was Ventersburg, and then it was Bloemfontein, where there was a road lodge at the airport 24 hours too. So at least we had accommodation, although not always having food. Great fun. One further issue befell me in the Tankwa Karoo. After the big drop over the Great Escarpment down Oberg Pass, on the way to the Tankwa Padstal, and you need to get to the Tankwa Padstal if you want food. Otherwise, it's a long way to Ceres. That's the only real place to get food through the Tankwa Karoo. about 3 k's before the Puttstall, luckily very close. I had a sidewall cut of monumental proportions. Managed to do a sewing job on the tire and run a tube to get me to the Puttstall, which was useful in time for a burger and chips. But it's after that that the tire started giving up. The tube had been punctured and pierced, and we weren't going places. Fortunately, got back to the Puttstall. There's cell phone reception there. Managed to find the local Mr. Bicycle of Series, the bike shop, the bike repairs, the bicycle organizer of Series, who very kindly brought us out a new tire from the bike shop, and it was the best $1,000 I've ever spent. So that was really useful. Very nice people that you meet along the way on this type of trip. And I could carry on with the trip all the way to Eden on the Bay. We arrived 8 days and 12 hours later. Nix was the first woman to do the challenge, which I'm very chuffed with. I was, let's just say, there for the food. It was a really, really, really pleasant experience all in all. Lots of laughter, despite sloshing around in the mud, despite the conditions not being perfect for fast riding. But a fine time was had by all, and it was great to see Blouberg Beach at the end.